All right, we're back. We are COMP1004 in the winter 2017 semester. We are week 13. Oh my God, part one of our broadcast. So we're sitting at the 10th. Next week, that's Easter, officially Easter Monday. No one's off, but we won't have to be here because there is no final exam in this course. I've wrapped it into your final project or your assignment number 5, right? It's worth 20% of your final grade, so there's no need for you to come in. However, if you want to come in and do your workshop and kind of work with others, and this is a free room for you guys to use. If you do need me, just let me know. Slack is a good way to get a hold of me, or you can always give me a call. We talked about that through Google Hangouts, and the way to do that is if you go to on Slack. So let's go to our channel. Here it is. And let's say you want to start off a call with us, or with anybody. Do you have anything against organization? No. Then what you can do is kind of do a Hangouts, right? So if I go Hangouts, now if I haven't included it, let's add the Google Hangouts integration. Let's just do that now. And you can always start a Hangouts with me. That's really weird. I thought I had included it, but maybe not. Save settings. There we go. Wonderful. So now if you wanted to, you could just go to, like I said, let's go back there for a second. If I put in Hangouts, I think, there we go. Start a new Google Hangouts in the channel. And then once you start it off, you can invite other people. All right. So I'm not going to do that, obviously, because I was just showing you how to do it. But you can do it right through Slack. And we can test it out if you need me, to connect with you or whatever on your assignment. Just to recap what we did from last week, we talked about assignment 5. So if we take a look at assignment 5 really quickly, you're building a slot machine. There's nothing new there. So today what I want to try and do is I want to do the slot machine. I want to do some examples of games we can make with Visual Studio as well as games we can make with Unity. Right, to cover both sides. There are people who are going to do Unity, which I'm kind of happy about. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we can do things in Visual Studio if you're not going to take the Unity route. Okay, so, which is totally fine. So if I go to lesson 12, which I think is where we had our, what was it, lesson 15? Yeah, here it is. So here's the assignment, which is a slot machine, right? And I wanted to bring this up for a couple of reasons. I want to talk about some of the difficulties you may have. And I've done this before, like I said, in other courses with varying degrees of success with the students I'm talking about. But more or less, again, remember what you're building. You're building this slot machine, right? So I've given you some of the code. So, and you got a starter project to make it go. Most of it already runs. The only thing you need to do is, how do I do any kind of animation if you're looking at doing that kind of stuff? How do I position all the buttons? How do I do validation? Those are basic things that you know how to do already. In fact, you should know everything. You should have all the tools you need to build this assignment from scratch. Never mind with my help. Now, there are people who elect not to use my code. You don't have to, but you need to make it so that it's winnable and that I understand what you're doing, right? When I look at the code, I got to go kind of look at it and go, okay, I get it. Right? Like, he or she is, I know how to win and I know how to lose, right? If I don't know how to win or lose on the game, something's wrong. Like if you go out and do your own fruit and that kind of thing and make it so that it's got a theme. Let's say you want to do a Hulk theme. Everything is about Hulk. I don't know if you're a Hulk fan or you're a Star Trek fan or a Star Wars fan or some other kind of fan. I don't know, Ghost in the Shell. I don't know if you like that kind of thing. The original, please, not the new one. All those ones, you could do whatever kind of theme you want. But at the end of the day, it's got to make sense to me. So if I look at it and I go, okay, I got to match 3 for me to win, or I got to match 2 and then some other non-losing one. That's fine, right? Like in my version, as long as you don't have a blank, you win something. You win something back, right? That's how it works. Whether you just get your money back, or whether you get a bit of a bonus, like some, 2 times or 1.5 times, whatever you get from whatever credits you put into the machine. Okay, so you can decide if you want to use my code or not. I think it's already there. There's no need for you to change anything or adapt anything beyond. But if you really want to, if you want to add additional reels and that kind of thing, that's up to you. Okay. So let's go back to this. Let's take a look at your starter code. And remember, I got my slot machine starter code right here. So one of the things, if I wanted to create some kind of animation or movement in with Visual Studio for a second, anyone have an idea of how I would go about it? I want to move something across the screen, and I want to do it every frame. What the hell's a frame? How do I make anything move? Anybody have any kind of ideas on how to do it? Yeah. And the? And oh, in the upload, yeah. I mean, let me go back here. Let me go to the slot machine. You're talking about in the script, from a script perspective, how to do it. But I'm saying, how do I show the animation? How do I show the animation physically on the screen? Right? Anyone have an idea? Usually what we do is, when I say animation, please don't take me like we're being Disney animators here. Okay, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking motion graphics at the very most. Right? Some of you may come back and say, Tom, I'm not an artist. And I told you guys before, and if I haven't, I'll tell you now. I hate that when people say, I'm not an artist. I don't do art. All I do is development. I've never seen art. I don't want to see art. I'm going to close my left eye. I don't want to do CSS. I'm only a developer, right? That's just insane in this world, right? So please don't say those kind of things. If anything, at the very minimum, you are all technical artists to some degree or another, right? Either whether you're a very small level of skill or a very high level of skill. But all of you should be technical artists of some sort. The ability for you to use an image, move it around, that kind of stuff, at the very minimum, you should understand. Because what if you're asked to do something like that by the true artists, a person who all they do is, they're graphic artists, they create images and assets for you, and you're asked to move things around. So for this example, what I want to do is, I want to talk about page flipping animation. So think about this, does anyone have any kind of, an old notebook one time, and then they kind of drew a little character, and then they went to the next page and drew another one. It's the same character, but in a different position. You ever do that? It's called page flipping animation. So actually, in every page, on the edges, on the corners, right, where you flip the book, a flip book, right, you have this little, even a stick figure. You can try it out at home if you have a chance, right? Get a little notebook and draw a little stick figure and make it move around, right? Slowly, every page, change the figure's position, make him do something else. Page flipping animation, right? So when you actually flip the book, you thumb through the book, and the pages flip really, really fast. It looks like, in our mind, the character's actually moving, but there's no movement really, right? You're just flipping pages, right? But the way it's being done is, it's all because of our persistence of vision, all right? Persistence of vision. So if you're going to do a page flipping animation, which is not what we're talking about here, we need to talk about persistence of vision. So if I say, and I want to not just talk about any persistence of vision, I want to talk about human persistence of vision, right? Because there is different persistence of vision for different animals and other kind of things. For example, bees have a very, very high persistence of vision, right? And the ability for, and this is the Wikipedia definition, the optical illusion that occurs when visual perception of an object does not cease for some time after the rays of light proceeding from it have ceased to enter the eye. In other words, what happens is the eye cannot clear the image from one moment to the next. It's so quick, right, that the eye maintains almost like a shadow of the previous image on top of the new image. And our persistence of vision, roughly between 24 and 30 frames or flashes of movement every second, right? We lose the ability to discern between 24 and 30 frames per second. In fact, most movies still today are done at 24 frames per second, right? Because it's the place where we can't tell the difference between one frame or one cell of a movie and the next, right? Think about a movie as one long, no movie's done like this anymore, but there used to be one big reel, right? And as the frames would pass by the actual camera, you would have the ability for it to look like you're flipping the animation, right? Disney animation was around 24 frames per second. Some of the older Hanna-Barbera cartoons, for those people who are old enough to remember, and for people who aren't, if you actually look at the old Saturday morning cartoons, they were actually done on a slower frame rate, usually around 12 frames per second. So you saw more of a jitter, some kind of animation that kind of didn't look exactly very smooth, right? But for most kids, who cares, right? They don't care. It doesn't matter as long as the story is there and it's funny, right? They didn't care at the time. Nowadays, everything is computer animated, everything, right? Even kids' cartoons, right? So of course, everything is smooth and between 24 and 30 frames per second at minimum. So when I say frames per second, what I mean is slices of time every second. So if I take a second, which is 1,000 milliseconds, and slice it up 30 times, right? How many milliseconds is every slice, every frame? Every slice of a second is called a frame. How many milliseconds would it be approximately if I took, what is it? 33, something like that, 33 milliseconds. And normally for video games, we try and accomplish a 60 frames per second, which means roughly 16 point something milliseconds every frame for 60 frames per second. Okay, if I have that, then what can I do? I can create a timer. And the timer will repeat every 16 milliseconds, right? And if I do that, I have a game loop. And if I have a game loop, I can make any game I want, right? What do I mean? So I want to add a timer, but I'm not going to add it to this because this is your example, right? I want to go to my Solution Explorer, and I want to add a new, I'm going to pin this up here, and let's add a new form. Make a new form, add, we'll say a new form. And we'll call this form, I don't know, we'll call it a canvas. Or the game, we'll call it game form. How about that? Game form. Here's my game form. And let's suppose, just to make it like a game, I'll make this form a little bigger. And if you want to, just to be accurate, let's make this form at 640 by 480. All right, so I'm making, I'm using the, my window to make a form that's exactly, so this is an old 640 by 480, it's actually an old, proportion for old video games, right? And actually I still use it today when we make web games, right? 640 by 480, right? 1024 by 768, one of those kind of, sizes. Obviously I don't care for the title, so I'm going to get rid of what part? What part am I going to get rid of? I don't want the title and I don't want any of this stuff. The control box. Very good. All right, so I go to my control box and turn it off, right? And I definitely want this to appear in the middle of my screen, so I'm going to change my start position to center. Right, and you know what? I really don't like when my font gets reorganized, especially when I'm doing anything like this. So I'm going to kind of do none. So again, all those things are done, right? One more thing I don't want with my form is I don't care for the name of my game to be on the top. I just want my form to have no borders. So, form border style, if I go to the form border style that I want to use, right? So if you look at make sure that I got this right. Here's the form border style. Instead of sizable, I want to go to none, right? Just like we did a splash screen. We did a splash screen. So there's nothing in here, just like this thing, right? This one image. So what I want to do here is I want to drag and drop a timer. And if I search on the toolbox here for timer, right, here it is. And I kind of drag this timer onto here. Now I've got a timer. And if you notice on the right-hand side, the interval is 100 milliseconds. That's what this thing is. Now, for me to do 60 frames per second, I got to do 16 approximately. So let's put this into about 16, right? And if you actually do the calculations, for those people who want to know exactly the amount, you can take 1,000, that's 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second, divide that by 60, right? And you get approximately 16.6666 milliseconds, right? So we want to put something in here. Now, can I put in an interval like that's a dot, like 16.667? And if you notice, the property is invalid because it's looking for an integer, right? So anything like between 16 and 17, you're okay. Here's actually, I'm actually trying to push a little faster than 60 frames per second, but I want to just use 16, okay? Now notice that my enabled is false. Definitely when I run this timer, my enabled is going to be true. Okay, there's my enabled. And I don't want to call this thing timer. I want to call this thing game loop, okay? Because that's what this thing is. So I'm going to kind of rename this thing, right? So I want to kind of refactor, rename. I could, but I was going to rename it as game loop, let's say. There we go. So my timer is named game loop, and that game loop, right, is going to trigger, right, because I've enabled it, every 16 milliseconds. So it's going to just do something every 60 milliseconds. So it's almost like a drum beat. Boom, 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 boom. Every 60 milliseconds, it's going to do something over and over again. What do I want it to do? I want it to, a couple things I can do. I can make it redraw my screen, right? I want to redraw my screen, right? I want to redraw my form over and over again, 60 milliseconds, every 60 milliseconds. How do I do that? Is there a method to redraw my screen, right? And what about the events? Is there some other? There's the tick event. So every tick, right, on tick, so if I double click on this, here's my tick, my game loop on my tick, right? This is my ticker, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, right? I want to do something every frame, right? So if I look at the form itself, which is this, and that's the form. And if I want to redraw or draw, so if I want to, draw my form, right? So I want to draw or activate. What do I have to do here to redraw my form? Paint. Sometimes I think it's called paint. Here it is. My paint event, right? I can raise my paint event. Okay, that's what I want to do. Raise my paint event says, raise the appropriate paint event. Okay, I want to raise the paint event. So I want to redraw my screen. I can do that. Or maybe simply, I just want to move something across the screen. I can do that too, because you know what? At the end of the day, the great thing about this every 60 milliseconds is I don't have to worry about it. So let's say I want to put a simple shape on the screen or something like that. And I want to, I don't know, move it across the screen. Now, I don't have basic shapes, okay? I don't have that. But if I go back to my gameform.cs, and if I add some basic controls, let's add a basic control that I want to move around the screen. Let's say, for example, a picture box, which is more what I want to do. So here's my picture box. Let's find it. Here's my picture box. And you know what? I want to load an image in here, right? Like something that I want to move around the screen, okay? I could do that. I could load an image that I want to use. You know what? I feel like swords today. Let's find a sword image. Why not? Sword. Sword of the week. All right, here we go. I want to find a simple image for a sword. I'll use that one. Let's see if I can get to there without. That's a neat sword. Okay, let's copy it or save as image. Save image as. We'll put it onto my desktop for now. Sure. Actually, you know what? I will make this, I'll call it sword. And is it going to be in here? It's not. But let's just put it on in there inside my COMP1004. Sure. So we don't lose it. Great. I got my sword image. And I want to look at my, so I gotta have something to play with, right? Come on. And I want to look at my slot machine. So I want to look at my folder in File Explorer. There we are. So it is there, COMP1004. Fantastic, right? So in that in the VS folder, that's where I'm actually looking. So I'm going to take this sword, cut it, and go into my folder here in my slot machine, in resources, and since I have it already, and paste it. There we go, paste. Now, I can't use this sword the way it is. Why? Because one, it is a JPEG, and it's got to have a white image, which is kind of ugly, right? But what I can do is I can copy it and do a little bit of processing on it. I'll take it back to the Mac for a second, and I'll paste it in here. There it is, my sword. And I'll double-click on my sword in Fireworks or your favorite paint program and get rid of the information behind. It's a lot of work, but what the hell? So let's kind of zoom in here. It's not a great sword. It's not like, it doesn't look like a lots of resolution here, but who cares? For our image, I'll just cut out the stuff, the information that I don't want. There we go. Ooh, that makes it ugly. Let's go back to. Let's go and drag this up here and change my tolerance to 20. Oop. 20? Okay, let's go even lower. Let's go with my tolerance to something like 10. All right, and let's undo that change. So undo, undo, tolerance 10, and see that that's not even good enough. Let's go for a tolerance of 1. Oh yeah, lots of white. That's actually not that great. Find another sword. That's the best way. I don't have time for this. This is not the course. For me to do pixel by pixel painting, I'm not going to do it right now. An obsidian sword, sure. Okay, I'll do that. Obsidian sword. There we go. I like that. They haven't blade. PNG. There we go. I'll look for that. Okay, that's not exactly what I'm looking for, but maybe there's another one that's not bad. With a bit of a shadow. Is there one without a shadow? Hey, that's perfect. Okay, that's a cool sword. I'll just grab that sword. Save image as. And we'll make it as short. Black sword. Black sword. Black underscore sword. And I'll put it on the my desktop there. Save. Wonderful. And it's just for demo purposes anyway. So I'm going to grab this sword. Are you guys sharing it with me? Copy it, go over here, and inside of my folder, I will paste this in. Paste. Yes, there's my black sword. Okay, cool. Now that I got the black sword in here, what I want to do, of course, is in references, I want to include it in my resources folder, right? So my resources folder doesn't include my black sword because I haven't included it, right? There's a couple ways I could do that. What I'd like to do, the best way when you include references of any kind, is go to your project and your slot machine properties, your project properties. You can look at resources, and I want to add an image, right? So images, I want to add a resource. And let's see if I can do it another way. I want to add an existing file, which is from my downloads or desktop. And this one, right from the same place I had it before. And hopefully I'll be able to get that black sword. There we go. There's black sword and open. Yes, good. Now that will be included and I can access it. Save. And now that I have that on the references side, let me just make sure that's the right thing. Which one did I use? Don't need this anymore. Okay, so I've got my sword and it's been attached. So if you look at the resources, there should be black sword now. There it is, black sword, right? And of course, in my form, I can include this when I click on my image. So choose my image. I'm going to choose my black sword. Just to make it interesting, I could have chosen anything, but what the heck? That's weird. But that's because, of course, I've got normal, it's pretty big. If I go stretch, no, that's not what I want. I want to go zoom. And this way my sword is proportional. And let's make it kind of bigger. There we go. And I want to move this around. Okay, cool. Now, the other thing we have to do, because I'm modifying my slot machine form, is inside my my program. What do I got to do? I gotta reference my my game form as opposed to my slot machine form. So I'm going to change that up. So I'll review. And let's just test it out because you know what? We said it's supposed to work, but you should just see a sword kind of in the middle of the screen here. And there's nothing happening in the tick event, so it should totally work because even though the tick event is triggering, nothing's happening. There's my sword. Yay. Now what I want is whoa, that's loud. What I want is for my sword to move up the screen or somewhere else, move my sword around. And how do I do that? Can I change the X and Y coordinates? Does the sword have X and Y coordinates? Or is it the form itself? So if I look at the form, I can see that this image here has a set of coordinates. I'm just going to do this. So you can see it. Right now it's at 219 and 128. Wait, where is that 219 by 128, by the way? Where is it? Bottom right, top left? Top left? Is that where it is? 219 by 128? Well, if I put it at 0 and 0, the test is always what happens when I put this at 0 and 0, right? And wherever that goes, you can see that that is the top left corner. So the top left corner, the way that we draw stuff, like I talked about last week, I think, is we use a top left to bottom right kind of standard, right? So top left up here is your 0, 0 mark, right? And now as you move across, you go positive X in this direction and positive Y in this direction, right? Which is a little counterintuitive. Usually we want to think about positive as up, but typically in computer graphics, unless you're using some kind of system, it's positive Y is down, right? That's one. What was that? Well, let's take a look. Where would we anchor it? How would you anchor your thing? Well, here's the top left, right? And if you notice here on the anchor, you can choose where you want it, right? So it doesn't really give you a lot of choice, but it's top and left. What if I want to make it in the middle? Can I choose all the anchors? What happens there? Right? Top, bottom, and left. Now, if I choose my locations, this doesn't mean anything, top, bottom, and left, but let's just see if I was going to go into, you know, X is 100, right? So if I say 100 by whatever, right? Now, notice that my Z coordinate or my Y coordinate is 0. What if I went to 10, right? See, it still sees down. So to me, I'm not sure that it would be the top. It says top, bottom, left, and right, right? So it doesn't really have a, you know, a center. I wish it did. Like I wish you could type in a center coordinate, right? And like type in center, like, you know, get rid of all this and type in center. If there was such a thing, right? Top, bottom, left, and right. So top right, bottom left, top bottom, you know, just got to try and figure out where it's going. So if I go 0, 0 again, the way to know this, if I go 0 and 0, it goes there. So from a location perspective, which is not what I really want. So what's the problem with this? If I did top, bottom, left, and right, by the way, let's just change the name of this thing to black sword. Black sword, there it is, right? It's my black sword. What's the problem with this? Well, because we need to keep that in mind, right? When we move things around with the screen, it's the top left corner that we're using as an anchor point, right? Which is negative, right? Now you could do an offset, but we need to know how big the actual image is. Like right now, for example, we're showing an image of size 203 by 139, right? But that doesn't mean anything. I can actually make this more compressed and it'll resize according to the size of my screen. And that's what I kind of want. But you see there's a bit of margin on the right-hand side. Look over here, right? If I make it too large, it won't enlarge too much. But if I start making it a certain point smaller, it'll actually start shrinking the image, right? So about right there is where the actual size of the image is, right? 159 by 184, right? So I do have X and Y coordinates, location. And if I want to move something around programmatically in my location, how do I do that? So here's my game loop. I want to do it every frame. And I want to refer to this thing as my black sword. So I say kind of black sword, right? Can I look at location? Is that something I can look at? Oops, if I can type location, right? Dot X, can I do that? The X coordinate. I can also look at the anchor, right? And if I want to see what it is, it's a property, right? That I can gets or sets the edges of the container to which a control is bound and determines how a control is resized with its parent. So that's not really what I wanted anyway, right? Anchor, right? But the too bad there wasn't a pivot. That would be nice. But typically, if I want to move X, if I say my X, black sword dot X is, if I add 1 to it, can I do that? Can I add 1 to the position? Let's say location, sorry, location. And it has to be, of course, the capital L, right, because it's a property. So location dot X, can I do this? Dot X, capital X, plus equals to 1. And what's the problem with that? And it says, gets or sets the coordinates of the upper left corner of the control relative to the upper left corner of its container. It cannot modify the return value of control location because it is not a variable. Why? So It says I can get or set the value. Can I make it so that it's equal to something else, equal to 1? How can I set the location? Right? How about if I look at this location? What's this? It's a point. So what I need to do is do something like this, right? If that's a point, I can say, well, I want a new point that's equal to, and point is a class. Let's say we'll make the point 100 by 100. Will this work? And then that'll do this every frame, but you won't see the difference, right? So let's try this out. So we'll move from programmatically where it is on the top left, somewhere in the middle. Let's see how that works. So run. And okay, wasn't exactly in the middle, but it looks like it's not at the top left anymore. Okay, that's 100 to 100. It probably is around right here. I don't know if that looks like 100 by 100, right? 100 across and 100 down. 100, 200, 640 by 40, yeah, maybe, right? So you can do it that way using a new point, right? But that's kind of tedious, right? If I have to make a new point every time, right? So it'd be nice to kind of read what the X value is originally and add to it. So for example, maybe what I can say is var. Remember, you can use the var keyword to kind of annotate. We don't know what type it is, right? New position, or we'll call it location. New location is equal to, black or black sword dot location, right? Black sword dot location, the current location of the black sword, whatever it is. Here's my new location, right? And I only want my X and Y coordinates. So I want my new location X, right? So we'll call it new location X. It'd be black sword dot location dot X, right? Whatever that is, plus something, right? Plus 1, let's say. Can we do that? We can, right? And if I go var new location Y is equal to black sword dot location dot Y plus 1. We're going to add 1 to it every time. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put in our new location as a new point. So we're going to say new location X and new location Y in here. I can actually spell location. Location. This wonderful. So what's the problem here? Why is the name location X? Hold on a second. Location X. If I can actually type properly today. Maybe I can't. All right, so what it's doing is it's taking these, whatever they are, and if I hover over them, it's trying to figure out what they are. They're actually integers, right, that I'm getting back, an integer value. So then I could cast these as ints. Ints. I don't have to use vars. Okay. So what this is going to do is every frame, every tick, right, it's going to take the old location, right, which is right here, and add 1 to it. Then assign it to new location, these variables, and then make a new point, the new point that I want it to be at, this little location, right, every frame. So it's going to move it down and to the right, right, down and to the right, diagonally right, every frame. Let's see what happens. And it's going to move pretty quick. So right, and if I did it right, then we should have a sword moving around the screen to the right and down, right? How about what happens? What happens when it goes off screen? What's going to happen to it? Is it going to still be on somehow in my program? Is it going to be gone? Can I call it back? What happens to that image? But it's gone. I don't see it, so I don't understand. Like, how far can it go before my program crashes? Right? Will it crash? For a long time, it won't crash. Put it that way. Maybe an hour, right? And the reason for that is because it keeps track of, this can keep track of positions of objects, controls in memory, right? Many controls, number one. And it really depends on your graphics card and your CPU. But at the end of the day, you can kind of put this, this thing off screen for a while. That's not what we want. Okay, here's another thing I want to do. I want to rotate my image, right? This sword, every frame, I want to rotate it by 5 degrees, all right, or something like that, some amount of angle, right? How do I rotate? Well, let's go back to the gameform.cs to get a hint of what we can do. Remember, everything that we can do, a lot of times, I don't need that, I wanted this one. a lot of times this, I want properties. A lot of times what we see here as properties, we can make, kind of do something with programmatically, right? So first of all, do I see some kind of rotation, right? Well, size mode is zoom. Here's my size, right? And if I want to rotate a control, that's a totally different thing than if I want to rotate an image. This is not really, a canvas that I can rotate whatever I want. So you got some limitations here. Now I can move it down. And if I can move an image down, you're halfway to doing your animation bonus for your slot machine, right? Because all I'm moving it down, and as long as it's being blocked or masked by something else, right, in front, it can look like it's happening, right? It's happening. And I can test to see if this image physically goes off the screen somewhere. And by the time it goes to the bottom, I can just reset it to the top, and it can keep coming down over and over again, like as if it's kind of scrolling down, but it's not really moving. I'm just resetting it, right? So I can keep resetting these images over and over again. That's one thing I could do. But can I rotate my image? And if I look at, for hint, if I go rotate control in C sharp Windows forms, got to be very specific, or else. All right. So is it possible to rotate a button control in Winforms? There's a Stack Overflow question. You can't rotate controls. It's simply not supported by the native API controls that Winforms uses, right? And one might wonder why it even should be supported. Of course, because we're not making games within Windows Forms. That makes no sense, right? But the only workaround is to draw the controller's image to a bitmap, hide the control, and draw the bitmap onto the form in the location you want it to appear. Of course, that won't result in a control that user can interact with. They won't be able to click an image, a button. So what does this mean? It means that I have to swap out the image and do a little bit of an animation swap every frame, the best of times, okay? So again, Windows Forms is, can I do simple movements around the screen? Absolutely, every frame. But some of the controls that I have aren't really usable. I'd have to animate it all, which is crazy hard work for us to do, right? To make a game with Windows Forms, right? And by the way, you probably won't want to do it that way anyway, right? But just in case you're wondering, okay, so moving a control around, no problem. Rotating a control, that would be a problem, right? Now I can move around any control I want. I can move around labels. I can move around perchance images like this, whatever I want. I can move them around, but I can't do anything else. So let's suppose that I want to just do this loop. I want to kind of move it down, and when it gets to the bottom, so when the top of this goes below a certain point, I want to loop it so that the bottom of this image kind of is off screen, and it kind of goes back on the screen, and it keeps on doing that over and over again. All right, because that's more like it. That's more like what we got to do from a slot machine perspective anyway, right? So let's go back to the drawing board here. We know we can't rotate very easily anyway without some kind of API or some other thing we're going to tap into, which we're not going to do because it doesn't make any sense, right? But let's suppose that we want to move down the Y direction by 5. So there's my 5. I don't care about the X direction so much. Let's move it so that by default, my black sword. So when I launch my game or my this form, my black sword location X is always going to be, I don't know, something like 100. All right, that's what I want to do. And if I can't, of course, I can't do this. So I'm going to kind of do this new point where I put X is equal to 100 and Y is equal to 0, right? Because it's not going to move down that way. And what's the problem here? It says gets or sets the control cannot modify the return value of control. Oh yes, I meant to do this. So that location is equal to this new point, this new location, which is 100. It's going to start it off like this, and then instead of it modifying the X coordinate, which means it won't move to the right, it'll move down by 5 pixels per frame, right? So this one will be whatever the old location is. So we might look at the old location of my swords. I could say something like, in one line, so you know what, I'll make it easy. Say something like int location of y of x, current location of x. So current, what was that? No, I don't want that. Current location, because I might have to modify it later. Current location of x will be equal to, I'll read the black sword dot location dot x, right? I'll make that equal to that, and I'll just put current location x all the time. Maybe I want to modify that later. I don't know. Only the new location is going to be modified as the y location is going to be up and down by 5 frames, 5 pixels per frame. Right? So if I look at that and I run it, now it should move considerably faster down, until it goes off the screen. There's a bit of jitter, right? And that's because my screen is not being redrawn. I'm actually physically changing the location of an object, and the screen is being used. My form is being updated anyway. It's causing it to redraw, repaint everything. And the problem with this is because I'm not blitting the screen, I'm not buffering my object. It's kind of, I get a bit of jitter. That's just going to happen, right? Because I'm using Windows Forms. Okay, so what can I do here? I want to test to see when I get to the bottom of my screen. So when my Y location is greater than 480 pixels, right? Then I want to reset. So let's try doing that. So I'm going to say, let's try that again. So if my new location Y is greater than or equal to 480 pixels, right? Then that's a good case for me to reset. So I'm going to call a underscore reset. We don't have this yet, but we'll make it. I want to reset my form, right? That's what I want to do. And I want to reset the sword off screen again, right? Maybe I'll have another private void reset method. And all it does is reset the location of my black sword, right? Dot location. I want to reset it to off screen, a new point. Now this is interesting. Can I read the size of my object, right? Because my size, the object itself, black sword, is actually a picture box, right? Well, we know the picture box dot width and height, it's automatically kept track of. So we want to say that when I want to put my new point so that it is the same as my, which is 100. Here we go. But my y coordinate, I want to make it so that it is a negative value off screen of the size of my the height. So dot height, right? I want to make it the height of my sword image, but negative, right? So negative height. So basically off screen, the whole height of the screen beyond the top of my screen, right? So we're going to use a negative black sword height. So the height, maybe let's say the height was 100. So now it would be negative 100, which means it's above the screen. You can't see it because remember everything starts at 0, 0. So if it's negative height would make it off screen. All right, so that's this thing. And if I'm going to do this, I might as well call the reset function here, right? Because I might as well call this dot underscore reset when my sword comes into being, right? So let's see if that works. All right, I'll explain this again if you guys have questions. Let me just try this off. So it's off screen and it drops in, and then it's just going to keep going and going and going, right? Forever and ever, right? Now this will just keep repeating. So I'm actually reusing and resetting the sword so it looks like it's moving off screen right over and over again. And I can make as many copies of this thing as I want, right? And position it at different places, right? So, if I had all my images, right, in a loop, let's say as an example, and if I wanted to move them really fast, because this is really slow, I'm showing you how it works. Let's move them really fast. So I'm gonna stop this. So let's suppose I want my images to flash, and instead of moving down about 5, and this is a hard-coded value, right? So maybe what I want to do is, put a value in here, like, we'll call it this.dy, right? So change in y. We don't have that right now. We can set it up. We can say that we have a property up here in our class, right? Which is it's an integer, and property is going to be called dy, right? Here it is. And we can set up our dy value when we reset. On reset, we can set up our dy value. So this dot dy is equal to, as an example, I don't know, something greater than that. Like let's say 20, right? Now what we're doing is we're setting it at 20, and we do that every reset. If I want to, I can also make it a random value, whatever I want, right? I can change the sword's location on the x-axis randomly if I really want to as well. So it's going to appear at different places. There's lots of stuff you can do here with what we got, right? Let's try this out and see what happens. So it's going to be much faster, right? So imagine your slot machine is moving, boom, 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 but maybe even faster than this, not fast enough, right? How fast can we go with it to be able to work properly? We don't see some really weird effect. Let's go to 40. So 40 pixels per frame. Moving down the screen. Again, this is all machine dependent, right? And then when it stops, right, it'll stop somewhere in the middle of your screen. So bam, bam, bam. It looks like it's animating, but it's not animating. It's just moving off the screen, and we're resetting it. It's illusions. It's a trick, right? Which is like every game effect out there. We use tricks to make it look like it's animating, but it's no animation. We're just moving it around, right? So that's this one. And now we're only doing it for one sword, but let's suppose that I had not just one sword, but an array of objects that I had on here. So I had, I don't know, 3 or 4 of them. I don't know, however many I want. Well, we'd have to set them up first of all, right? So it's got to be physically drawn to the screen. Or do we? And now, for the first time, I want to look at what it really looks like when we actually create the sword in the first place. This sword is just an image that's on a picture box, right? Well, if you look at the game form, we have to talk about this sometime. The game form designer, if I double click onto it, it draws programmatically all the controls on your screen, right? This is what happens here, your game form designer, right? So under Windows Form Designer generated code, this little plus, notice that between 23 and 72, these two lines, there's a bunch of lines that are hidden. But this is what's really happening here, right? Down in here, here's the black sword right here. Ooh, right? My black sword is physically being drawn by the system, right, when I drag and drop it on. And there is no event for the black sword, right? But you can see that I'm setting up some defaults when I drag and drop this image onto my screen. Notice that the anchor completely is a foible. It doesn't even matter. I don't even need it, right? But they drew it anyway. So this is what this thing actually does. So what if I took all this code here, just saying, and I took it out of here, right? And I put it inside of my code, right? I could do that, right? And I can generate the sword programmatically as opposed to me dragging and dropping it, right? That gives me a little bit more control. I could do that. And I know that the sword itself is 159 by 184. I know how to do that. Notice that my location is a new system.drawing.point. Notice that they had to put in system.drawing here, but I didn't. And in fact, system.whatever is already included because at the top of my namespace, it wouldn't be here. At the top of my namespace, the system namespace is included inside of my code. So if you look at my code, at the top of my code, you can see that the system namespace is there, and the system.drawing specifically namespace is there as well. So therefore, I don't have to go system.drawing.point. I don't have to do that. I just have to go point, and then it's okay, right? Use the point class, right? So I could draw it out manually, and I could create an array of those, but the easiest thing to do, of course, is to drag and drop it onto my screen. So let's say I have not just one of these, but maybe 3 of them, right? How do I do that? How do I start them? You know, what if they're random? Can I make a random case for them, randomly drawing them on the screen, these random swords? How do I do that? Well, first, what I want to do is for each of the swords, and hear my words when I talk, for each of the swords that I'm going to create, right? Pseudocode. I want to do this kind of work, right? This kind of relocation, right? It's almost like I want to make a custom control or a custom class that I want to create, right? And again, hints about this would be if I go back to my my game form designer, right? what I'm doing is I'm saying this dot black sword dot anchor, right? But where do I actually define what black sword is in the first place? I mean, I'm just saying this dot black sword, right? Here it is. Here's this dot black sword, right? But I never really make a black sword in the first place. I never like instantiate a new object that's called black sword, right? I never do that. Where is that done? And can I instantiate this somehow? Can I make it so that I want to make a new picture box, right, with some of this information? Okay. Let's do it, but let's do it programmatically. So just to get some hints, I'm going to grab all this code here, copy it, and go back into my gameform.cs file. And what I want to do here is when I instantiate my gameform, I want to call, maybe an initializer start. We'll make a new little, we'll get rid of this in a second, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. We'll call this make black sword. Let's make another black sword, right? That's just it. Inside, I'm going to populate that text. All right, so there we go. So black sword, blah, 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 blah. But this doesn't make any sense, right? I want to make a new black sword, right? A new one. So I'm going to say var, right? We're going to call this thing, and actually what I should probably do is put it up here, right? So we're going to call it a public, I'll make a prop. And instead of an integer, what I want is a picture box, right? And I want to call this property for the picture box my new black sword. So new black sword. So this is where I create I reserve some space for this picture box that I'm making. I'm just calling it new black sword, right? And then what I want to do is something like this. I want to instantiate it. So I want to, inside my make black sword, I want to do this new black sword, right, is equal to a new picture box object, right? Now, what does it need? I can simply make it like this. That's the first thing to do. I need to instantiate this object, a new picture box. This is like making controls programmatically. By the way, it's that week. It's the week where we do more advanced stuff. So, do I need you guys to do this for your final assignment? Absolutely not. You can make it so that it just changes the images of the pictures, right? Every time you click the button. That's fine too. But for this one, I'm just going to show you how this is done, right? So now we know that this is new black sword is what I want. So I'm going to kind of copy this, and I'm going to kind of do this stuff. So I don't care about the anchor so much. We'll leave the anchor as a default anchor, but actually maybe not. Maybe I won't leave it a chance. I may need this. So new black sword, and we'll copy this over here. In fact, I'll highlight this whole thing. There we go. Paste it in there. Well, didn't work. Love when this happens. So what I meant was I want to highlight all those, right? That's what I want to do, all these ones. And I want to paste in that new black sword stuff. Of course, it's not going to work. Whenever I try it, because I'm using a VM, she no work. So I'm going to just copy paste. There we go. All right, cool. Now this is good, right? And the tab index is 0. Who cares about that? It's still 159 by 184, and I've created a new black sword. Now this is going to layer on top of the old one, but it should be at the top left corner of my screen. Okay, top left corner of my screen. And let's see what happens if I kind of put it in place, and if I call make black sword somewhere, like before my reset. So I'll say this dot underscore make black sword. Be another one I'm going to put on the screen. Let's see if it kind of works out. If it doesn't work out, it's going to give us an error. We're going to fix it. Okay, well, what happened? How come? Where's my black sword, man? It's not here anymore. How come it's not showing? Well, one of the things I got to do when I make a black sword is I got to kind of attach it. Even though I make a black sword, I've made it here, right? Here's my black sword, right? But when do I ever attach it to my screen? I need to attach it somehow, And here, I'm just talking about the location of this thing, right? And it says I'm making it, I'm kind of using the same resources. Here it is, right? It's the anchor is the exact same, right? Here's my image, my location, right? This is where I'm putting it, my name, my size mode, my tab index, and my stop. But when do I actually attach this thing to my screen. How do I add that on? I'm going to add, remember, think about my form as a container, right? So I want to add this to the container of my form, right? So I made it, I configured it, and now I want to add it, right? So I'm going to say this dot add, right? Now, is there something to, can I add a control to the form programmatically? That's what I really want to do, right? So I want to add a control, to the form. Is there some kind of method that I can use, right? I click on add owned form. I can do that. I can control, that's an event control added. On control added, that's another kind of event, right? Both those, that's a method. How do I add a form, add a control to the form? Anyone, can anyone puzzle that out? Right? Programmatically. So I want to kind of use an add. Remember, my control, it's not added onto my form in any way. How do I do that? Well, we can always Google it. Let's go back. So if I say add a control the form, C#. I like programmatically in C#. That's another one. That's good. One I want, how to programmatically add controls to Windows forms at runtime. That's good. It's going to give you some stuff to do, right? And what I'm really looking for is a little code sample. Here's my class. Here's my controls. I make my text boxes this way. You can see that the same thing, right? Here's my control. And then here's my form border style. That's all the form stuff. And this dot button add dot back color, la la la. So add the following code into the form load event. Cool. And then, but I need to somehow, this is just a list box, but where does this thing be, can it be added to the form, right? Well, here's controls, add controls to the form, right? So this the controls.add is what I got to do, right? Otherwise, it doesn't get paired to the form at all. So let's try this out. So this controls, right? Dot add, and I want to mention the control, which is this dot new black sword. Okay, so let's try this out. Hey, notice what we see here. There's a bit of issues. One, my sword in the front, right? Even though it's a PNG, I'm still seeing the background white image that's scrolling on top. Two, right? The sword that's kind of resetting all the time, it seems to appear on top of my other sword, right? Because of the layer and order and layer. All right, let's talk about this a little bit. So one, I made it programmatic, right? Which is kind of neat. But the second part is, from a design perspective, if I look at my image, this one, and if I look at my properties, I want to change my transparency, right, for my image, right, to something else. So where do I change my transparency? Anybody have an idea? So here's my background color, right, which is control. And if I change this to transparency or transparent, right, so here it is, transparent. And if I run this again, right, we can see how that works. But hold on a second, how come I'm still getting that thing, man? I'm still seeing that weird thing going on, right? I know that it's a ping image, right? But I'm getting that happening. How come it's not showing my transparent image, right? My background image, notice that there's this thing here. It doesn't have a background image attached. It has an image. Here's my slot machine image, right? But it doesn't have a background image. Okay. I could. My background color is transparent though, so that should do it, right? Or should it? So let's see what it actually did inside the in the code. So I go to my game designer again. You can see now that what it's done for the actual form itself. Location, here's the image. Resources, black sword. Location, size tab. Well, didn't change a darn thing, did it? Look, here's image. Back color, transparent. Right, so my color in the background is transparent, but somehow it still comes out as white. Is there something I need to do, right, from a form perspective? So if I go do my project properties, And if I look at my sword, here's my black sword, is there other properties that I have from this? I can't really do much here. There's not a lot of control that I got here. I mean, I either got one or I don't, right? So how do I do that? Because, I mean, it is a ping image. I know that. And the ping has transparency because that's how I downloaded it. I didn't change the PNG image, right? Did it change here physically when I added it in, right? Well, none of these changed, but I guarantee that they're going to have a white background, right? Because that's how I made them, right? So how do you modify that? And if I choose transparent, is it an opacity level? No. Should I use this as a background image? Would that make a difference? So let's Google it again. So make image box transparent C#. All right. There we go. This is the problem, exactly what we're experiencing. And what does he say? He says one way to do this is by changing the parent of the overlapping picture box, the picture box over which is lapping. Parent of the overlapping picture box, the picture box over which is overlapping. Since the Visual Studio Designer doesn't allow you to add a picture box to a picture box, this will have to be done in your code. So that's one way of doing it, but that's not what we want. But what about something else? So here's a picture box, the width and the height, and here's my background, which is colored.transparent, which is exactly what we set up. And we also can bring it to front or set to back because we can change the alignment of the object from front to back, right? Notice that the image test is the checker black. That's what they used, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to load in the test image, right? The image is the test image on the background, right? That's what they're showing here. Image list.transparent color. Oh, here's something else. I can indicate the transparent color as white, right? Which makes sense, right? That means everything on the image that's white will be transparent. So if I have a sword and somehow in the middle of it is white, it's going to see it as transparent. It's almost like I'm picking a color to be transparent. That doesn't really do it for me either. But let's just see what happens, right? It's a black sword, so we're lucky. But let's just see what happens. So my transparent color, image list, so transparent color. Let's see if that works. So go back here, and we're going to go to our object programmatically again. And my black sword, here it is. I'm going to say this dot new black sword. Let's see if I can even do this. Nothing's working. Image dot transparent. I can't modify that at all. That's why I don't know where that came from. When I saw it, I was like, nah, I never see that before. So that doesn't work. How about background color? So, black color, right, is equal to, again, just what we did before, color dot transparent. That's what we normally do, right? That's exactly what we did earlier, right? But that doesn't really handle it. This just makes my background transparent. It doesn't add anything to my color programmatically, right? But it doesn't really make my image transparent. We've seen that, right? Because this is exactly what we did here. Because remember, system.drawing is already included, so color.transparent is what we're doing here. So that really doesn't do it for me. Any other recommendations? Tell me. Here's the loop. Oh, which one? The loop. Oh, this in the loop method. Yeah. Yeah, that's not really going to do it. But sure, you know what? Just for you, I'll try it out. I don't think it's going to make a darn difference myself, right? That means like every frame you're trying to make it transparent. But if you set it transparent, why would it change? Right? It should work, right? The only time you make it put in the loop is if you're going to add something to change every frame, right? In this particular case, we're not doing that, right? So it doesn't make any sense. So the transparent color, again, let's do one more Google search and then we'll give up because I'm not going to spend too much time because we're going to move to Unity, which you can do all this stuff in 2 seconds, right? And we're working hard, but we can do it really, really easy in Unity. Not to try and sell Unity to you. So transparent image picture box, C#. That was done. Background doesn't seem to be transparent with transparent background. There we go. La la la, picture box problem. They have a bunch of things here. You got this little thing. He showed you the example, and he says transparent controls in WinForms are transparent relative to their parent, not to other controls. That's what we were talking. That's what we heard before. Transparency in WinForms is more akin to camouflage than true transparency. A transparent control doesn't actually let you see control behind it through the form. It asks its parent to draw its own background on the transparent quote-unquote control. This is why transparent control shows the form behind it, but covers up any other controls. And that's what I thought, which is that there is no way to make it happen unless it's part of the parent control. So it'll appear transparent to the actual the parent control, which is the form, right? But it won't be transparent to the actual image, the other images, which is a problem, right? Again, another problem you're gonna kind of see. Right? Now, here's the good thing, right? On a positive note, right? I'm trying to talk about these things to help you out to figure this out, right? On a positive note, even though this thing is the way it is in the background, right? A lot of times we want to see it come underneath, right? And what you want to do is you can break up the image of your slot machine in different slices. Right? Again, if you really want to work hard. Hey, I'm just giving you suggestions, right? You take your slot machine and you cut it up. You cut it up into different slices, right? And then one of the slices, this other picture box, has a little space, right? Just saying. There's nothing there. So when you pass through it, you actually don't have transparency. You have nothing there, right? So you pass through, you see the image in the background, and you see that scrolling image. Holy crap, lots of work. And when we come back from break, we're going to see how we're going to do it in Unity 10 times easier, or even 100 times easier, right? Because there's a lot of work to do a little project here in C#, which is not made for this kind of work, right? However, you can do some simple special effects, like moving things around. You can do that, which is what we showed you. But for a full game to be made here, unless you add another API or something else in here in the background, which totally doesn't make any sense, I don't recommend it.